With that said, that's my opening remarks. It's about to get started with our program. And our first thing up on the schedule is what we call a keynote, a VIP, so a very seasoned entrepreneur that is going to share his lessons with us. But before we're going to hear from the former CEO of Lagerwey Wind, let's first find out what this company actually does.
It's a beautiful big machine. Produces green wind power. Beautiful.
You can find Lagerwey turbines wherever in the world. I've been driving in Korea and there you saw a Lagerwey turbine on a mountain. And in Alberta, Canada and Alaska you can find everywhere Lagerwey turbines. Even in India, great fields full with Lagerwey turbines.
Lagerwey has a very long history. Of the old generation of turbines based on gearboxes, over 1,000 have been built and many of them are still in operation today. Of our modern technology, the direct drive, we're producing now one turbine roughly every 2 weeks. So also there, from this generation, a significant number has been built. It's great to be working for an entrepreneurial company. It's pretty small size, but we're growing very rapidly. And so that means that there are many development opportunities for our employees. But we also have the feeling that we build a product that really matters. And we're part of that energy transition. And I think with our technology, we also contribute to a better society. So that motivates everybody.
Exactly, a better society, that is what motivates everybody. A powerful quote. Now, we have our first keynote speaker here in our loft studio here in Delft. He actually graduated from the same Delft University of Technology himself. That was already in 1990, so kind of a long time ago. He started his career in strategy consultancy and banking to then move into the energy industry, being on the board of RWE, Essent, and even serving as the CEO of Nuon. Well, that's a big energy company in the Netherlands, we all know. But he then, in 2015, jumped in as the CEO of Lagerwey Wind, and he's here to share his most important lessons with us. It's a great honor and pleasure. Huib Morelisse, good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Let me also extend a very warm welcome to all the people at the other side of the camera. You've had a very tough year behind you. But I think there's a silver lining. I think this is the best time ever to become an entrepreneur. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is that there are huge technological changes. And being part of this university, I think you're very close to that. And the second is also from a societal perspective, climate change, all the changes that are happening, create huge new opportunities for people that have this entrepreneurial drive. What I'll share today with you is 4 challenges that I at least faced. So let's go to the first slide. The first challenge you will probably face is, do you follow the herd or do you follow your heart? And if I look honestly at myself, I was in the category that initially followed the herd. After Delft, I first joined more the traditional companies, quite money-driven at the end of the day. I got a good education later also at Columbia University. But in 2013, I thought, is this really what I want? And then with a good friend of mine, also from this university in Delft, we stepped into Lagerwey, an entrepreneurial company. More details I will follow on later. And in the last 2 years, I've set up 2 more companies. And I think the big difference between what I did before and what I do now is that I can also take the societal aspects and the environmental aspects into consideration. So I feel more purpose-driven in what I do. Now, the next slide. This is Lagerwey in a nutshell. It has had 3 incarnations. First time it was founded in '79, but it went bankrupt in the late '80s. The oil crisis, they hit in. Now, oil prices were sky high, but it fell to about $20 per barrel. So the electricity couldn't support wind anymore. The next problem came when there was a serial defect in one of the turbines. So again, in the '90s, a very successful company, but it again went bankrupt. And then Steven and myself, we stepped into the company in 2013. For me, it was the first time really being an entrepreneur. And And if I can give you one piece of advice, it is very helpful to do it jointly with somebody. And whether it's a good friend or somebody with complementary skills, that is something which is crucial also for success. Next slide. Well, the first year was absolutely fabulous. We won a Financial Dagblad Gazelle Awards. The turnover quadrupled, number of people went times 3. So we were really on a high. And we also raised capital, in this case 15 million. But it comes also with its challenges. Our revenue increased so rapidly that at one point we ran out of cash. And that is a typical problem, I think, with many entrepreneurial companies, that before you know it, you go a little bit too fast. And this friend of mine used to say, if you're in control, you're going too slow, but there is a balance to be made there. Another lesson there is, if you have an aligned investor, that is crucially important. If this person is only financially driven, it will be very hard to take this financial investor on a journey. So we explained the situation, and luckily the investor invested another 15 million. So we go to the next phase. Well, this is what happened in the 2.5 years after that. The turbine price was stable for decades. But then in the 2.5 years that followed, it dropped by 40%. And of course, that posed a huge challenge for us, because we were marginally positive, but we had to reduce costs very fast. So if we go to the next slide, what you will see there is 2 things. One is you need to have a distinct advantage. In this case, and perhaps we can show that on the next slide, our mantra was advantage through simplicity. And so we wanted to make sure that we stripped this wind turbine of everything that was not needed. And that resulted in the fact that we had a wind turbine which was 50% lighter than that of the competition. So very simply put, per kilo of steel or concrete, we produced twice the amount of electricity. So focus really on the fundamentals where you make a difference. And if you go to the next slide, logistics were also becoming hugely important in the wind sector. It's not only to produce the wind turbine, but also to bring it to the right size and then install it. So there we had 2 innovations. One is to make the steel towers of steel plates. So basically we assembled the steel tower on site. And the second point was that we invented a climbing crane. So a crane that crawls along the pylon as you construct the wind turbine. Now, if you imagine that such a normal crane costs about 100,000 euros per day, this provided also a huge cost advantage. So make sure you have something which is really distinctive. We go to the next slide. I say, we said fake it until you make it. This is our revenue relative to our competitors. So Vestas, Enercon, Nordex, they look a bit in the same ballpark as we do, but if you look on the vertical axis, it's a log scale. So we had 10 to 20 million in revenues. All of them had over 2 billion in revenues. So we were about, 100th of their size. And if we go to the next slide, we realized that we needed to have global reach. So we participated in a tender, in this case with a Russian company, to provide our technology, which was really superior on a global scale. So what you see there on the right-hand side, we built with them a huge factory, and I think nowadays they're producing hundreds of our wind turbines in Russia. In the process, we beat Siemens, and we beat, in the last round, also General Electric. And the fact that we could do that was really driven by the fact that we had this superior technology. But that brought us to the next level, so that we also were able to apply all our good technology on a global level. We go to the next slide. Yeah, then there comes a point where you have to realize, do I need to continue by myself as an independent company, or do I need to find a partner that I can grow further with? Now here you see, we have this kind of valley of death. I think we brought the company from 10 million to ultimately 150 million. But we realized that on the production side, we didn't have the scale to compete on a global level. So ultimately, we found a very good partner in Enercon. They had a research department of 300 people. We had 30, but with our 30 people, we have developed a superior product. And that's the next slide. Ultimately, we sold the company to Enercon in 2018. And I'm very proud to say that in 2021, so in this year, our turbine was elected the wind turbine of the year, albeit under the flag, in this case, of Enercon. So this has been our journey. So you need to be very alert in every step you take. And if I go to my last slide, in a nutshell, success looks pretty straightforward. This is what you like to tell. You start with an idea, you get some friends together, get some funding, and there you go. But the reality, of course, is very, very different. We have had many ups and downs, but I think the difference between following the herd, a path that has been kind of mapped out to you versus being an entrepreneur, is that you learn so much more. And the other thing is the fun element. If you challenge yourself, you also will find that you end up in a surrounding of people that are truly inspiring, and we have a feeling that you can make a contribution to the world. That brings me to the last slide, kind of in summary, the 4 points. Try after your studies to really follow your heart and not the hurt. If you don't fix this world, who will? So that's an important point. Second, if you do, make sure you have enough cash. Focus on something that is really unique. And finally, there may be a point that you have to sell out, and consider that moment in time also very carefully. So that's my story in a nutshell. And finally, I'm starting up 2 new companies. I started up 1 company last year and again in the beginning of this year. So once you get a hang of it, it's very hard to stop.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Huib Morelisse. If you are just joining us, and I see in the chat some of you have been experiencing some sound issues. Yes, all these sessions are recorded and will be published afterwards. So if you dropped in later or you missed the beginning due to sound, you will be able to watch this back. Another question I just read from, let me see where it was. I think it was Sam all the way in the beginning said, I wonder if this virtual Entrepreneurship Day will be interactive. Well, we are live and I am reading the chat. So you can submit any questions for Huib Morelisse about himself, about Lagerwey Wind, as you want. I keep my eyes on them. Huib, first question. That very powerful lesson that you started with and that you ended with. Follow your heart, not the herd. It sounds, since that you're underlining it, it's the most important lesson, but I can imagine it's also one of the most difficult ones. Can you take us back to that moment when you realized yourself starting your career in strategy, consultancy, banking, like you said, very money-driven? What was that moment where you realized, I need to go somewhere else?
If I'm completely honest, in the first 20 years, I was also kind of managing people's expectation of me. So it's very easy to say, if you work for certain companies, that you're successful. But especially my last job, and don't tell it to everybody, but as the CEO of Nuon, the degrees of freedom ultimately are very limited. Even if you want to make a big leap towards green transition, your room to maneuver is really small. And what I realized later is that you have the feeling that you're more in control of your destiny and can really shape and do what you believe is important for the world. You are also a happier person.
Exactly. And you also say at Nuon, it was very difficult to steer that ship. Is it easier to follow that passion and follow the heart in an entrepreneurial setting?
Yes, I think for 2 reasons. One is the traditional companies are very hierarchical. And even if you're at the top, there's still a supervisory board above you saying which way you need to go. And I think in an entrepreneurial setting, it's much more, you work like a team. So I think that is crucial. And second, all the renewal, or a big part of it, will not come from the main incumbents. And so if you want to make a difference, I think you have a much better chance of doing that in a new setting.
Exactly. So that's another, well, it's underlining those people watching who are already on an entrepreneurial path that they can change society, as you just said. Yeah. But then your one but last slide, that straight line of what success looks like, an idea, and then we grow, and there it goes, and then the twirly thing. Can you describe, in your position, what it feels like when the plan doesn't go as you planned, right? When the prices drop dramatically in the first 2.5 years when you step into a company?
Well, sometimes you really feel bad and shitty. You think, why the hell did I start this? But that are also the moments of greatest innovation and creativity. So when we saw the prices started to drop, we also, and that's what I put on the slide as well, ultimately that was that's the way we saved ourselves, because our product had certain advantages that the other products didn't have. So all of a sudden, we got a lot of attention from that. And second, like the running out of cash, it's also the moment of truth in the sense that then you go to your investor and tell your honest story and say, listen, I cannot always be in control, but we tried our best. And that are also endearing moments that people then say, well, we trust you, and here you have more money, and make the best out of it. And we didn't disappoint them, because in a year and a half, we kind of more than doubled their investment. Also financially, ultimately, they made the right decision.
Exactly, because that was a thought, and then I go to some audience questions that I had when you said, leap the valley of death, fake it until you make it. Especially when you go to investors and you want their trust because you want their investment, how does that balance out between faking and earning their trust?
Faking is not really the word. I think what I really meant is you need to think big. Because also if you want to attract the attention from investors, don't stay in your village or city. You need to have a solution that has global reach. And so what I mean by faking is kind of paint a picture for them what it could be like. So it's not the Fata Morgana, but it's the picture of what the future could look like.
Use that imagination and instill that image in their heads.
And they will feel if it's true, if you believe it yourself.
Exactly. I see a question from Frank Oudelaar. And you said it's very important to also surround you with the right people. You described how you joined up with someone together, Steven Polen. How did you find the right dream team to start with? That's something that a lot of people struggle. He says also, how do you start a highly technical startup which takes a lot of capital and man hours? How do you bring everyone together?
It's not a 100% rational process, but start, if you do it together with somebody that is different from you, with complementary skills. Because especially if times are tough, it is really nice to have somebody that you trust. And second, if you have a startup, every 3 months, you're reorganizing the company. Because people rise to a certain level, and then they find out, they may not have the competencies to do what they did so far. And so we were pretty open about that. So if somebody reached the ceiling, we were trying to find another place in the company and attract talent from the outside.
Exactly.
So don't be static, really make sure that you adjust whatever you have in your team on a 3-monthly basis.
On a 3-monthly basis, that is something to kind of and a horizon to keep on.
And the biggest mistake is to wait too long, because if people reach a certain ceiling and they become kind of the fact that blocks the company from moving forward. But to do it in a respectful way, especially towards founders and others, they've made a huge contribution, but also in the interest of the company, they may need to move somewhere else.
Which could be internal or external.
Yes, right? And all the people also that have left, I still have a very good relationship with.
Interesting question from Gustavo Carrizo. He says, what is it like that after being with a successful company, you just mentioned, and maybe we can dive a little bit in that, you left Lagerwey Wind, you started a new company, an investing company in purpose-driven companies. What is it like to start a new one? How is it different? Can you describe that?
Well, Lagerwey was a 30-year-old startup, so still a company with 30, 40 people. So early last year, I started the company from scratch with a friend of mine. So you really had to select the furniture again, and where you really start from scratch. I love it because we do it with a team of seasoned kind of people, and I can already feel ultimately that this also will become a success. And what you see, if you have a good idea, it attracts a lot of talent.
Exactly. So it's the power of the idea.
The power of idea, and also the conviction in yourself that what you're doing is really providing a solution.
Clear. Last question. Your new company is called Breathe. And
Yes.
if we look on that website, it says it's a purpose-driven investor.
Yeah.
How is that different from a more traditional profit-driven investor?
It's crucially different because what we set up is a foundation that owns the company. So although we were the initiators, we don't own the company. And in that foundation are all the key stakeholders of our company. So representation from society, from nature, from the users, from the financial community. So from a governance perspective, we will never be able to kind of flip the company and sell it for a lot of money. We can only do the things that are in line with the purpose of the company. So that's truly different, I think.
So that's a whole different pitching procedure.
That, but also, ultimately, if you go for normal private equity, there is always an exit, and there's always a moment that all the principals go overboard and you go for the highest price. We have enshrined in our governance that cannot happen.
And why did you decide to set up an investment company like that?
Because I think the idea was that the government will take care of all the rules and regulations, and then society and the planet will be saved. But that's not the case. If companies do not take that responsibility, it will not happen. So that means that companies need to really stand up and make sure they also make a contribution. And they cannot be kind of a play ball from financial stakeholders alone. And so they need also to serve their employees, the environment, etc.
Powerful, beautiful, and interesting to follow that path. I hope that inspires a lot of other entrepreneurs and investors as well to be more purpose-driven. Final question, Huib. In my introduction, I mentioned that you left Delft in 1990. If you're back now, we're very close to the campus. Yeah. If you could give the young Huib in 1990 one advice, what would that be?
I would say go off the beaten track. Because the wealth pathway may look secure, but also all these big companies, they will run into trouble. So, challenge yourself and go off the beaten track. I think it will be much more fun and much more rewarding.
And how do you recognize off the beaten track when you're at the end of your studies here in Delft?
Not every individual needs to start a company by himself, but try to join a team in an environment with a lot of focus on purpose, I would say, do something that is relevant, and a focus on learning. That you keep on challenging yourself. And there could be some bigger companies which still have this atmosphere, but typically you find it with those that start with new ideas.
Right. Thank you very much for your time, spending your time with us, Huib Morelisse. It's very inspiring, and the most important lesson, let's underline that again, follow your heart and not the herd.